Driving it home with Patti Vasquez, Patti Vasquez.
From global conflicts to greenhouse gases, the folks refusing to wear masks says, and politicians getting caught grabbing ass says, she's driving it home with Patti Vasquez.
Well, not quite Patti Vasquez. It's Paul Chivari filling in for Patti, who's taking a much-needed day off, and I'm thankful to be joining you today. And I'm also honored that Patti would select me to fill in for her today. She gets a much-deserved break. I always joke with her that she is the only person I've ever met that somehow managed to fit 30 hours into a 24-hour day. Patti is everywhere. I'll say she's all over the place, but I don't mean that in like ungrounded sort of, all over the place type of person. I mean, like, she is literally everywhere, active, talking to a lot of people, being a lot of places. So she gets a much needed break today. And as far as I know, she's back on Monday. So you just get me for today. There's a lot of things to talk about here on the show. I wanted to get into some of the top stories that we've been seeing on the news today. Of course, slower sort of news cycle this time of year, that long slog in between Christmas and New Year's, when just kind of everyone's kind of in a stupor in between the holidays. So the type of stuff that we're seeing, the anticipating what the upcoming Trump administration is going to be like. We see already Elon Musk and Vivek Ramaswamy disagreeing with the MAGAs on their stance on getting, I think, foreign workers into the technology field. So, I mean, with their Department of Government Efficiency that those two are going to be running in the Trump administration, I'm sure we're going to get many sort of different stories that kind of differ from what I think MAGA Republicans were voting for in November versus what some of these guys are trying to do. So we can talk about a little bit about that. But really, with this being the last Friday of 2024, I kind of wanted to get into a year in review sort of episode. It's crazy to think some of the things that have happened in this last year, because I think with recency bias, all we've been really talking about over the last few weeks is the election and, what the Democrats needed to do to win in 2024, what they need to do to win going forward in the next elections. And in addition to that, just dreading what the incoming Congress is going to be like, that is going to be completely Republican in the House, Republican in the Senate, and with the White House also going back to the Republicans. I still can't believe we Grover Cleveland this guy and made him the 47th president and the 45th president. That is just unbelievable to me. And I think when the history books open it up and you see that, this guy had people go to the Capitol in 2021 when he was the outgoing president, and just some of the inflammatory stuff that he's been saying and what he's been doing, that it's going to be crazy to think that, this guy actually got reelected by this country. I think it's going to be one of the weirdest things when centuries from now, when people are analyzing 21st century politics, why did they bring this guy back in? But I wanted to talk about 2024 and, what was your favorite part about 2024? What was your least favorite part about 2024? What are you looking forward to in 2025? So if you call in today, of course, any topic you want to talk about, please, 773-763-9278, 773-763-WCPT. I want to hear what you guys think. If you want to talk about 2024 and what you liked and didn't like about it and what you're looking forward to in 2025, that's great. If you want to talk about any specific topic that's on your mind, let's talk about that. I'm kind of open to that sort of thing. There was a really nice post that Patti Vasquez and her producer Jerry Wolski put up on their Facebook page for the Patti Vasquez show, just kind of introducing me as today's guest host, and they kind of gave me some homework. And because of my background in sports, I am the co-host of the Sports Cubicle, which you can hear on this station on Sunday nights at 9 p.m. Central. But the last night was the Chicago Bears game against the Seattle Seahawks. The Bears extended their losing streak, which has been going on, I think, for about 10 games now. It's kind of crazy. I saw a stat that since not the last Sunday in September, so I think it was September 20th, the second to last. Since then, the Cubs have more wins than the Bears, and the Cubs only played 1 week of baseball where the Bears have played slightly more games than the Cubs did. So that's a crazy stat right there. And, of course, with just the turnover at Hallis Hall, firing Matt Eberflus earlier this year, firing was it Shane Waldron, their offensive coordinator, earlier this year. It's a team a little bit in turmoil, and they had high expectations going into the year. Obviously, they have failed to meet those expectations, and the ownership group being scrutinized, the McCaskey family. I think there were reported chance of sell the team last night as the game ended. It was a very boring game, 6-3, all field goals. Bears had a chance to kind of tie it or take the lead late in the game. A lot of mismanagement. I'm not going to break down that totally, but I did want to address the part where people are saying sell the team. And, of course, I think it's going to be a fat chance that ever happens, because this is the original ownership family of the Chicago Bears, founded by George Halas over 100 years ago, ceded to his daughter. Originally, it was supposed to be his son, but his son died of a heart attack a few years before George Sr. passed away. So it ends up going to Virginia McCaskey in the early 80s. Her oldest son, Michael McCaskey, who's since passed away, he was a team president for a short while / general manager. Currently, Ed McCaskey is kind of at the helm. Not necessarily the team president per se. It's, I think, Kevin Warren, someone outside of the family making those decisions. But as far as them selling the team, I can never see it happening, because this is a team that was purchased, I think, for $100 back in 1921 and is now currently valued at about $5 billion. And with the succession, I was kind of researching this for today, and I found out that in the NFL, the ownership groups have to submit what their plan of succession is should something happen. And Virginia McCaskey is over 100 years old, so I don't think she's going to be owning the team for another 100 years, in which it would probably go to someone in the McCaskey family. And I've always wondered, okay, so you're born into the McCaskey family, let's say. Your mother, your grandmother is Virginia McCaskey. There's got to be something within you where there's an interest in wanting to conduct football operations. Someone that maybe wanted to get into scouting or coaching or something like that. And I'm just through just kind of the grapevine of talking to people, I've never heard of such a grandchild or child stepping up and doing that. So if Virginia McCaskey passes away, I don't have high hopes for whoever takes over that they're going to do anything remotely different than what the current ownership group is. So I can understand the frustration from Bears fans. I think some of this is a little expected. I think there's going to be big decisions made in the offseason in terms of who the head coach is going to be, and we don't really need to get into that here, because we'll gladly take those calls on Sunday, as the Sports Cubicle is actually going to be live for the next 4 weeks, taking over in the spot for the family meeting while they go on their winter break. So expect to hear from us 4 p.m. to 6 p.m. for the next 4 Sundays, as we discuss this week the year in review in sports, and going forward, just whatever the hot topics of the week are. So please save your thoughts on Bears coaching and ownership for maybe that show more so than this show, which is going to be a little bit more kind of open-ended, a little bit more political, and perhaps maybe a little pop culture we can get into in some of the worldwide events that we saw in 2024. But I think while I'm on the topic, a supporter of a lot of the shows here, and especially the Sports Cubicle, Jim from Chicago is on the line. And I have a feeling, Jim, that you're probably going to mention something about the Bears, but why did you call in today?
Anyway, Paul, I was going to say the Sox broke their record with the longest losing streak. Now, if the Bears, what, they tied their longest losing streak if they get Green Bay beats them up in Green Bay?
Oh, that's a good question. Yeah, I'm sure you're right.
I think it's so. Who do they open up with next year?
Oh, well, they haven't determined the schedule. That'll be out in April. So that'll.
Well, if they lose opening day, because I'm sure they'll lose to Green Bay, but if they lose opening day, that'll be their record. So we'll have 2 records, the Bears and the Sox, with the 2 losing as records in, 100 years or whatever it is.
Oh, yeah,
anyway,
yeah.
Well,
but I did look this up for you. So the longest losing streak stretched from 2022 to 2023, and it was 14 games. But I believe right now they're in the longest single-season losing streak at 10 games, still active, which is just wild to me. Yeah. Well,
14, so you got to lose one more and then a couple in the opening season next year. Anyway, the reason I called, Paul, you'll hear now, when I grew up in the 50s and 60s, there were 2 parties, a Democratic Party and a Republican Party. and nobody mentioned left-leaning or right-leaning or those are actually quotes from the French Revolution. They started to use right and left. The right would be for the monarchy, and the left would be against it. And that's 1789 or whatever the hell it is.
Yeah.
But now it's just the right, the left-leaning. Well, I don't even understand what I voted Democrat all my life, and I've never gone into the booth thinking, "Oh, I'm voting for a left-leaning candidate." I've never even considered that. Or I don't know if Republican goes in thinking, because to me, Republican was always small government, watch the budget, every man for themselves kind of a party, where the Democrats, at the beginning of the 20th century, were more involved in the everyday life of an American. But those two terms are driving me nuts when I hear that. Oh, he's right-leaning, left-leaning. To me, there's two parties. The Democratic Party's been the parties for 200 years. 1824 was probably when they were first solidly Democrat. And the Republicans, after being the Whigs and know-nothings, and then about 1858 became the Republicans. So it's been that way, and it'll be that way, it seems to me, for another, God knows for how long. Oh, my God, if we last 4 years. But anyway, that's all, Paul. It's good to hear your voice. I have to call in for the sports thing.
Yeah, you should. We would gladly welcome your call, Jim. I know you always contribute to all these shows, and I know you got a lot to say in the world of sports, so we would love to hear from you this Sunday.
All right, have a good show, Paul. Thank you very much.
You too, Jim. Thank you. Yeah, Jim raises a good point, though, the left-leaning, right-leaning. I mean, it's, we could go into, there's a divide, obviously, like kind of a clear line drawn in the United States between the two parties and kind of their polarizing ideologies. And whether that's kind of influenced by politicians or by the media or just by policy, there is left-leaning, right-leaning. But I kind of, just to kind of an aside from that, it seems like anyone that disagrees with Donald Trump gets called left-leaning by people that support him or himself, even if they're staunch Republicans and have been loyal to him up until a point. So I don't know how much stock we should ever take into someone being called left-leaning or right-leaning, but I think people tend to vote with their interests. I mean, I know there's a lot of independents out there, but I've seen a lot of people consider themselves independents, but they'll unilaterally vote for Republican candidates. They're just too afraid to submit to being a member of a tribe, I suppose. But that's just me kind of speculating as is. But before we get to a break, I did want to mention on the show today, in the second hour, I'm going to be talking to Brittany Ruland from Iowa. She's a frequent contributor on the show, a Democratic strategist and Iowan who's been, very involved and very active in politics in Iowa. So we're going to talk to her about some various subjects, including J.N. Selzer being sued by Donald Trump. What an interesting case that is, as, polls are just kind of collections of opinions, and what does she have to do to defend that lawsuit, saying that she had Kamala Harris winning by a few points in Iowa in one of the polls leading up to the election. Trump considers that to be election interference. I think that's kind of ironic coming from him, and I think that's just such a tough case to prove. He was saying that he was he didn't want to do it, but he was how did he say? I'm paraphrasing this, but not necessarily like, well, I didn't want to do it, but it's my duty. I kind of have to do this, and I'm wondering if it's just he has so many lawyers on retainer, he just needs to keep them busy during the slow holiday season. But that's just one man's opinion. But once again, this is Paul Chivari filling in for Patti Vasquez on Driving at Home with Patti Vasquez. I want to hear from you guys. I got some people waiting on the line right now. 773-763-WCPT, 773-763-9278. We're going to be back in a moment.
Tonight on Democracy Now!
As Palestinians mourn 5 journalists killed in an Israeli strike near a Gaza hospital, an event clearly marked press. Then President-elect Trump says he wants to make America greater, as in larger. We'll speak with a member of the Danish parliament from Greenland about Trump's vow to buy Greenland.
All those stories and more tonight at 10 on WCPT 820. Chicago's Progressive Talk, WCPT 820, where facts matter.
Patti Vasquez is taking your calls now at 773-763-9278. Driving it home with Patti Vasquez now on WCPT 820.
Well, Paul Chivari is going to be taking your calls, filling in for Patti Vasquez today on Driving It Home with Patti Vasquez. Some sad news to report that I was just informed of. Greg Gumbel, the sportscaster, passed away at age 78 today, succumbing to cancer. Which I think I was aware that he had some health issues, but I don't want to turn this into such a sports heavy show, and I'm a little more multidimensional than that. But as someone who personally got into broadcasting and sports broadcasting, Greg Gumbel was a big influence on me. So it's just really sad to hear that, and I think he has a local connection too. I'm a little young to remember, but I want to say he was at CBS 2 Chicago before he went on to some national stuff with CBS Sports and NBC Sports. So just a dynamic person in the field of broadcasting, sports broadcasting, and of course the older brother of Bryant Gumbel, who's a legendary broadcaster on his own. So just sad to have to report that to you, that Greg Gumbel passes away at 78 years old. But I want to shift back to politics. I see TJ from Oak Lawn is waiting on the line, wants to talk about where did the Democrats go wrong. TJ, where did the Democrats go wrong?
Oh, hi. I tried to get this idea across the months before the election, but I just couldn't seem to get anybody to understand where I was coming from. But
well, to be fair, TJ, we were blindly optimistic going into November, so I apologize on behalf of all of us that didn't listen to you.
Okay, well, listen, I appreciate this station, and this station needs to expand. If that means internet or any way possible, this station needs to expand because it's one of the few outlets that's actually telling the truth, okay? But we don't have a lot of outlets. So a lot of these people, misguided people, are in a factory working, and they're not listening to WCPT, okay? And a lot of these misguided people, the second you say progressive or liberal, they're going to turn the station, even if you did get them to tune in, okay? All right? So now one of the mistakes that the DNC made was they should have had a campaign of putting billboards next to our expressways. Now, the reason I say...
Now, before you go on there, TJ, were you the one that just texted the picture of the... Okay. I got it up in front of me right now, so this is perfect.
Okay. Now, Joseph Goebbels, the Nazi, said if you repeat a lie over and over again, people eventually will believe it. Well, the reverse of that is if you tell the truth over and over again, people might actually stop and think. Okay, now, let's say a misguided truck driver, he goes down this expressway 1,000 times a year. Okay, he may not think nothing the first time he sees that billboard, okay? But maybe the 14th or 15th or 16th time, he might stop and think, no, I don't want to lose my Social Security. Maybe I'd better go home and check that on the Internet. Now, if they had a massive campaign across the country, mainly in swing states, to do exactly what that billboard there said, you might have got some people to pay attention and to worry because, again, not everybody's watching The View, not everybody's listening to MSNBC, not everybody knows about WCPT.
Oh, and a lot of people don't want to involve themselves in politics. Most of the people I talk to, if they, haven't picked, which side they want to be on, tend to be like, well, I don't really follow politics. Whether it bores them or aggravates them, or they just consider no matter who's in charge just doesn't really care about their interests.
If you tell them that Trump and Musk are coming for their Social Security, they might pay attention.
Yeah, no, and I'm with you on that. And I think that's been obvious for a long time that the Republican Party has been very clear about their stance on Social Security and why they want to do away with it. Oh, I'm sorry.
Medicare.
And Medicare, yep, and Medicare, yeah. Well, and I think, we're going to be bracing for some of this stuff coming up in 2025 and in the next 4 years with just some of the slashing to the budget and departments and, welfare and all of these different things that Trump ran on. And that's, while I don't take a lot of stock in some of the stuff Donald Trump says, there is a nugget of truth to some of the stuff he says. And regardless of who would be the Republican president, whether it was Trump or someone else, Social Security going away is something that I'd always be concerned about, because I remember this with, Mitt Romney talking about public broadcasting and things like that in 2012, so it's just been kind of the MO of the Republican Party. And now they do have the House, the Senate, and the White House, and a heavily strong conservative Supreme Court. So, if they're going to act on some of these things they've threatened, this would be the time.
And now, can I say something else about where your station is doing it wrong?
Sure.
Again, I appreciate WCPT because it keeps me on tabs of what's going on, okay? But most of what I'm hearing is just preaching to the choir, okay? Now, let's just say you were able to put a WCPT on a billboard somewhere, okay? And a truck driver would see that, and he'd say, it says in big letters, where facts matter. Whoa, okay, so he's going to tune in. But I'm telling you, from my experience, I'm 62 years old. I've heard this 1,000 times. The second you say Chicago's progressive talk, they're going to turn the station. Because of the word progressive and liberal have become dirty words. Now, if you were to call the station Realist Radio, or just say where facts matter, you might get somewhere. But these people are so misguided that they're all God and guns and hate gays and all that BS. That liberal and progressive are dirty words, and they're going to turn the station, and they're not going to listen.
Yeah, I appreciate that constructive criticism, TJ. I mean, that's something obviously management will have to address with how we want to brand ourselves going forward. But I can understand that, and just kind of on your point that progressive is seen as like a dirty word, and for whatever reason, it seems like we never really attract those middle to right sort of people. We always attract the extreme right that wants to kind of hate listen to this station and just completely dismiss what we have to say without having a constructive conversation about it. So I'd also like to hear a little bit, from the middle from people.
I'm almost tempted. I had flags in front of my house. My house was attacked a few times by Trump supporters. I had one flag said Trump is a fascist. Another one said Project 2025 fatal to all. But I'm thinking of putting a flag up in front of my house saying WCPT, where facts matter, just to get people to listen.
Hey, we would appreciate that.
They're not going to listen. They're not going to listen if you continue to call the station progressive or liberal.
Yeah, that's going to be hard because our call letters, Chicago's Progressive Talk, CPT, that would be a hard rebrand. So,
see, here's the thing. I don't need to be reminded that I'm a progressive. I know I'm a progressive. And all these LGBTQ people know they're progressives. And all the people that listen to this station, but we all know. We don't need to be reminded that we're progressives, okay? It could be our little secret what the call letters stand for is what I'm saying. So.
Got you. Well, TJ, I appreciate all of that. Thank you so much for calling in. Thanks for sharing that text. It's the expressway with the big billboard says Trump and Musk are coming for your Social Security. I think there's a nugget of truth to that TJ has there, that the Democrats could have done a better job kind of advertising that, and having a better plan of attack. But here we are. All we can do is lick our wounds, collect the loss and regroup for 2025 and 2026. But we're going to take a break here. This is Driving It Home with Patti Vasquez, Paul Chivari filling in. Back in a moment.
Because facts matter. You're listening to WCPT 820.
You're listening to Driving It Home with Patti Vasquez on WCPT 820.
And I suppose you are only listening to WCPT because our video stream is just reset, so maybe we can get that back up and running. But I want to remind you that you can listen to Driving It Home weekdays 5 to 7 right here on 820 AM on TuneIn and as well as heartlandsignal.com. You could watch the live video stream if that was working, but we're going to be working on that ourselves. And we're on YouTube as well, assuming that we can get back up and running. But when you're at Chicago's WCPT 820, assuming we're live, you can click there on the live tab. I want to go back to the phones. Margot from Maryland's been waiting patiently. She wanted to talk about homelessness. Margot, how are you doing today?
Hi, fine. I kind of agree with your last caller about your call letters, but I want to get into my main story. I think one area where the Democrats have gone wrong in the last few years, I know a lot of low-income people, homeless people, and disabled people over the last few years. I've noticed a lot of them have been leaving the Democratic Party and moving to Republican or independent candidates because they feel like the Democratic Party, pays attention to race, gender, LGBTQ, but not that much to disabled people or homeless people, But I want to also say that I know several people, including one in Chicago. I think they're in the Chicago suburb. I think they're in Romeoville. I can't give full information, that are about to be evicted and have nowhere to stay. One is a person I know from middle school. I don't know. I know that there's been a shortage of homeless shelter beds around the country and a shortage of housing, and I just wanted to call in to just to let the public know about this issue, and that we really need to do more to help the homeless, not just immigrants. We need to help them too, but we also need to help people who were born in the United States who are homeless. And I don't know if you've noticed this, but it seems like even in the last 6 months there's been an increase in people being evicted and people becoming homeless, and a shortage of homeless shelters. I don't know if you've noticed that. And that's all I really want to say, because I could go on and on and on for hours. But thank you so much for listening to me.
Thank you, Margot. And it's a great point to bring up. I'm seeing it right now. Record high homeless counts, a record high 653,000 people experienced homelessness on a single night in January 2023. This is more than a 12.1% increase over the previous year. And that's according to endhomelessness.org. And to your point, I think you were talking about Romeoville, but I had heard in, I believe, Elgin, along the river, they're also evicting a lot of people, like near the river and near, I think, train tracks there as well. There was a whole entire just encampment that a lot of the local residents were not even aware about. And I mean, this wasn't just a few tents. It looked like an entire little city, with like a pathway, like a little residential neighborhood of tents. And it's an issue, I think, that maybe we're not quite aware of here in Chicago as much as maybe the West Coast, where, just travel to any major city on the West Coast, Portland, San Francisco, Los Angeles, and, there's tent cities, there's, streets just with homeless people just kind of lined up there. And the crazy part about all of this, though, is that there is enough housing in this country. We have the resources, but for whatever reason, we're not applying those resources to the people that need it. And while I don't know specifically what the Democratic Party has done for homelessness, I would assume that it would be way more of an effort than what the Republican Party has done, considering some of the, slashes to the, budgets, some of the welfare programs that could help get these people back on their feet. But then there's also the thing, too, and I know this doesn't represent all homeless people, but there's some people out there that just want to be kind of drifters and want to be, that sort of, want to be, homeless. And I know that doesn't speak for a large percent of that population, but I think that's an issue as well, because it's like we need a spot for people to go. We just can't have, our underneath the on-ramps or the overpasses or, in the forest, the camps in the forest be the solution to this issue. So it's crazy, and it's a great thing that you brought up, Margot, and I really appreciate you, bringing that to our attention today. Just want to remind everyone that this is Paul Chivari filling in for Patti Vasquez on Driving It Home with Patti Vasquez. You can listen to podcasts of this show. We have full episodes and featured interviews. You can subscribe to one or both. The podcasts are available on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, TuneIn, iHeartRadio, YouTube, and Amazon. Just search for Driving It Home with Patti Vasquez, or get the links on the Driving It Home show page by visiting heartlandsignal.com and clicking on Patti's picture. On that page, you can also find a rundown breakdown of Patty's guests each day this week and links to listen again or watch the live YouTube stream. And today we will have at 6 o'clock, we will have a guest from Iowa joining us, Brittany Ruland, to talk about the state of Iowa politics, especially, I believe this is her first appearance since the November election, so we're going to get a little bit of insight as to what she saw there in Iowa coming up in the 6 o'clock hour. But I want to move to Jack from Chicago. He's on the line saying Chicago media gave Trump free talking points, and I'm very curious as to what you mean by that, Jack.
Well, I think, I don't know that anybody's actually done any research, and I would really like to see research done on how much time the mainstream media,
Oh, we lost you there for a second, Jack. You said the mainstream media, and then you kind of faded out on us. All right. Yeah, we don't have you, Jack. We're getting a broken signal for you, which is a shame because I know you're waiting on the line for a while there. But I don't know what you were getting to with that. But I think some of that, I think you're saying the media gave Trump free talking points, and I think that's just the media in general has always done this, where, going back to when he declared his candidacy, back in 2015, that guy has gotten so much free advertising just by being a newsmaker for the wrong reasons mostly, but it's free airtime, and we commented throughout the Biden administration here that it's just kind of strange how a guy that wasn't even, president was getting more attention than the president himself. So, I mean, I think that speaks largely to the, the P.T. Barnum personality of Donald Trump, and that the philosophy he probably carries where, bad publicity is also publicity. So I think anytime he can live rent free in our heads, he's winning in his book. And I mean, you could see, I think we were just pretty much just dazed by the results from last month's election. The President-elect Trump calls it a landslide victory, but then, if that's the case, the 1.5 percentage points different in the popular vote, if he considers that a landslide, then, Biden defeating him in 2020 must have been a massacre. But regardless, here he is. He gets another term, and he has, now at least for the next 2 years, the entire legislature and the entire Supreme Court behind him, and possibly a chance to extend that lead in the Supreme Court if any justices decide to step down, including Sonia Sotomayor, who would be the oldest currently active left-leaning judge on the bench. So we could perhaps be in another Ruth Bader Ginsburg type situation where we're just hoping that she makes it through the next 4 years, so that if Trump gets replaced by a Democratic president, that maybe we can put in a Democratic justice. But Jack is calling back. Hopefully we have a better connection. Jack, I wanted you to get to your point about the media giving Trump some free advertising.
Yeah, I hope I'm coming through better.
Yeah, I can hear you now.
Okay.
So I don't know what's happening with your phone here, Jack. We're losing you again. It seems like once you start talking, it just kind of fades out. So, Jack, you can always text us your thoughts, 773-763-9278. That phone number works for calling in as well as texting us. Especially because someone had already mentioned about earlier when I said that, why does Trump sue people? And they're saying that Trump sues as an intimidation tactic. He doesn't have to win the suit. He only needs to bankrupt his adversary. And that's true. If it's a numbers game and a dollars game, this guy has an unlimited supply of lawyers and money to keep throwing at the issue until someone just relents and either has to pay a settlement, like what we just saw with ABC News and George Stephanopoulos, or, actually has the capital to fight him tooth and nail. And they went on, who could afford the legal fees and disruption to their life? This buys him acquiescence from the press, who will be even more afraid to speak out against Trump's crimes. So thank you to the 312 for pointing that out. Let's go ahead and take a break. When we come back, we haven't even gotten into 2024 yet, some of the things that happened over the last year, because it's crazy to think some of the events that I completely forgot about just because of just how long this year has been and how eventful of a year it's been. We'll come back with more Driving It Home with Patti Vasquez, with me, Paul Chivari, filling in.
Hey, Google, play WCPT.
Streaming Chicago's progressive talk from TuneIn.
You're listening to Driving It Home with Patti Vasquez
There's so much that goes on behind closed doors.
on WCPT 820.
Thank you for listening to Driving It Home with Patti Vasquez. This is Paul Chivari filling in today for Patti, who should be back next week. She's taking a much-needed break. Before we get to more phone calls, originally in the show I was saying, since this is the last Friday of 2024, it's always like the time of the year when you can kind of look back at what happened this year, what was the good parts, the bad parts, maybe what you're looking forward to in 2025. And I apologize in advance if everybody else is doing this or if Patti herself is going to do this next week. But I just figured this was a prime opportunity. And one of the things, so for me personally, my favorite part about 2024 was getting to see the total solar eclipse in April. I was fortunate enough to head down to Carbondale, and a friend of mine had moved down there a couple of years ago, and I'd been in touch with him, and then he got us invited to a party that people were hosting in the middle of the day, kind of in the middle of like rural Carbondale, in between Marion and Carbondale, and it's beautiful country down there. I went to school for a year at SIU Carbondale, and I really liked it down there, but I had to leave for my own reasons, as I thought I might get sucked in and become an alcoholic in SIU Carbondale. But my favorite part about 2024 was heading back there and seeing that eclipse and being able to share in that experience with some friends and family. My least favorite part about 2024, obviously, is the election results. The GOP taking the House, the Senate, and the White House. And I think that's, maybe I just fell victim to that blind optimism that I was talking about earlier. Perhaps maybe I just kind of, fell in love with Kamala Harris like the rest of us did. I just thought that was such a unique campaign, and I always thought it was just so badass when she would come out to that Beyonce song. It just felt like such a power move by her, and I think maybe we just got caught up in the whirlwind and maybe just failed to see what the writing on the wall was. And I'm promising myself and to you guys that I'm regrouping, and I'm going to come out swinging in 2025 whenever the GOP starts messing around with our stuff, and hopefully they don't cut the welfare programs and don't cut Social Security, but we'll be there ready to fight them tooth and nail on all the things that we can do right here at this station. And what am I looking forward to in 2025? Well, it's going to be a sports thing. I'm a Liverpool Football Club fan, and they're currently riding such a huge lead in the Premier League, doing well in the Champions League. So I'm hoping that this spring they'll be lifting some silverware. So that's my selfish little looking forward to in 2025. But I want to know what everyone else feels about, what was your favorite part about 2024? What was your least favorite part about 2024? What are you looking forward to in 2025? So share your thoughts. 773-763-WCPT, 773-763-9278. But of course, I'm willing to talk about whatever you guys want to talk about on this show, including Leo from North Carolina, who says we need to get the truth out. They go low, we go high. Leo, thank you for joining the show today.
Yes, sir. It's South Carolina, actually. But,
okay.
I wanted to echo. I wanted to echo your last caller. I apologize if I'm late. I'm listening to tune in. He said, put billboards out there, be as in their face with the truth as they are with the propaganda. But also, I think, especially our young Democrats, the squad, Maxwell Frost, the young people need to be in front of the camera as much as they are. AOC is doing Google Podcasts and stuff like that. Keep that stuff coming. But we need to adopt a Jasmine Crockett mentality of, I'm intelligent, but I'm willing to meet you where you are. If you want to get into a name calling, we can do that. That's not my favorite thing to do, but we cannot back away from the truth. And I do. I think Jasmine Crockett should be the head of this party. I think, we need 200 more of her.
And it's unfortunate that I think that we have to go that route, though, where it's almost like we need to be, as snarky as the right has been. I thought that, decorum and having kind of an ethical or moral sort of high ground would be enough to impress people. But I think this is just a different United States than, maybe the one I heard about my parents growing up in. But sorry, go on, Leo. You seem like you had something else to say.
I'm agreeing with you. I'm agreeing with you. I don't like it any more than you do. But what this country wants, and I lost money on this in 2016, and I lost my pride on this in 2024. This country's not what I thought it was, and I'm afraid. I'm not saying we can't go back, but we do need to meet people where they are, and they want strengths. And on one hand, where I will agree with this is you can't back down from a bully. And that's what Donald Trump is. That's what the Republican Party is. And if that's what they want to be, then we have to stand up to the bullies. And if that means, play in the mud a little bit, then that's what we got to do. But we have the left. I'm getting back to that conversation. The left for too long has said you're entitled to your opinion. All right. I don't think we need to say anymore that you're entitled to your delusion. I mean, you can have it, but I'm going to tell you you're wrong.
Yeah.
Like this whole thing about we can't talk about religion and politics anymore. That's, my mom and my grandma saying stuff like that is why we are where we are. We shouldn't be talking about our wages. That's rude. Well, that's good for your boss. So as opposed to saying, I'm not going to be part of that conversation. I'm going to take the high road on that. Well, conservatives never – there is no conversation they're not willing to have. They feel like they're entitled to say whatever they want whenever they want. And I think we need to do the same.
Yeah, and I think there's just at least what it seemed like with why voters chose the Republicans this time around. It just seemed like it was reasons that weren't necessarily the truth. I had heard the hyperbolic notion that this was the worst economy since the Great Depression, and that's far from the truth. And it's shameful considering that a lot of us were old enough to have experienced the 2008 recession, which was the worst since the Great Depression. So, and then hearing Trump in Time magazine basically saying that, he can't do much to fix grocery prices. And he can, though. That's the thing. While the president doesn't have a direct influence on it, the Democrats were trying their hardest to fix price gouging. And of course, Donald Trump isn't going to address that. If anything, he's going to encourage more of that. So, it's just crazy how low informed the voter is and what they expect. And of course, we've been hearing people reporting about people wanting to take back their vote or looking up what tariffs are. And I hate to say it, but I almost feel like we have to go through the bad period to learn what the good period will be. If the last 4 years didn't teach us anything, then it's what are the next 4 years going to be, and what are they going to teach us, and will people start being engaged and paying attention again?
I'm with you. Sadly, I'm not that optimistic, but I'm trying to cling to what little bit I've got left.
So, are you not optimistic, though, because South Carolina is kind of a red state, so maybe, you're kind of like a minority thought in an echo chamber of right-leaning views?
South Carolina is not a kind of a red state. It's a deeply, disgustingly red state. And to make matters worse, Leo is not my name. It's my profession. I'm a cop, so I'm completely surrounded by it. It's bad. It's very bad, but also it's not just South Carolina. Like, you look at how many people went through this in 2016 and up to 2020, we survived it, thank God. And I was like, there's no way we'll do this again. But either they voted for it. I mean, I'm not saying he picked up any more votes, but enough people said, meh, I'll just sit this one out, knowing the risk.
Yes.
And that's scary. And, I've been trying to call in Tom Hartman for a couple of weeks now because at one point some troll called into his show and said, my mom's a Trump supporter. Are you calling her a Nazi? I think we need to say yes. So I worked on a Marine patrol, and they had a Trump parade out there on the lake. And it's disgusting how many Nazi flags there were. The problem is, the people with the most flags and the ones with the Nazi flags and the ones with all the racist comments, they have the biggest crowds around them. And we need to start saying that. Listen, I'm not saying you got a Nazi flag. I'm not saying you wish to be a part of the Nazi party. But what I'm saying is they're in your party and you're not leaving. So if you're okay with it, I hate to say it, you are one. And that's the kind of approach we need to take, I'm afraid.
Yeah, and we see that just the way kind of Trump and his supporters kind of carry himself. It's a cult-like sort of following that he has, and a lot of people will blindly give him a free pass that, they hold other people more accountable than him. And I've seen it with, like with yourself being a cop, how many people say they back the blue, but then you see those images from January 6th, and, you can only say that you back the blue so much, but when it gets put into action. But, I'm glad though that as someone as a police officer that there are good ones out there. There are ones that I think people get wrapped up in the saying the polarizing, all cops are bad, and I don't find that to be true myself, because I know that there's guys like you out there that have to keep their thoughts to themselves around their coworkers, but are out there doing the good stuff on the ground for us. Yeah, I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, I said at least in training. Now that I'm out of training, I can be a little bit more vocal. But that's bit me in the butt in the past. But listen, I don't back the blue, and I've told everybody, like all of my coworkers, if we're doing our jobs, I've got your back. But if you're trying to violate the Fourth Amendment, I do not have your back. I do not believe in the thin blue line. I'm more of the blue shield for the community. There is no line between us.
And that's how it's supposed to be. You're supposed to serve and protect the community that you're working for.
That's right. Now, and I correct people who tell me they back the blue. I don't need you to back the blue. I'm here for you. I appreciate your support, but I don't like what the blue line stands for. I think the blue line is the new Confederate flag, and I want no part of it. You can have it. I'm not blue. I said it to a guy today. I'm actually at work right now, getting ready to go home, and you're absolutely right. I'm just another person in this county when I take the vest off.
Well, we thank you for your service and your hard work, Leo, and also, thanks for finding WCPT out there in South Carolina and contributing to the conversation.
Absolutely. Thank you all for having it.
All right. Well, that was Leo calling in from South Carolina, and says we need to get the truth out, and he raises some good points, and it's nice to hear from people around the country, because I think sometimes we get lost in our own echo chamber, and I think we've had a few callers today kind of point that out, that we're progressives, we're Democrats, we're kind of listening to each other all the time, and not really maybe thinking about what's going on the other side. But there's been some interesting takes in this show so far today about kind of putting up the dukes and maybe bullying the bully, or at least standing up to the bullies, and I suppose we're going to see what these next 4 years bring out of all of us. Before we wrap up this hour, I guess I was trying to think of because I started at CPT in the middle of the Trump administration, the last couple of years of it. And I was trying to recall some of the ways we covered him, some of the things that were happening. And I remember that there's a lot of just noise sometimes coming from the right and coming from Donald Trump, where, he might say something that's inflammatory and people maybe latch on to that more so than trying to find out what the truth is behind it. And I think one point that we've seen so far in this current cycle of Donald Trump is, the Matt Gaetz for Attorney General. And I think, a lot of us believe that was actually going to happen, or at least was trending towards trying to make that happen. But then after, they decided, I think, to go with Pam Bondi instead of Matt Gaetz. Then when I thought about it, I was like, well, maybe that was a decoy. Maybe they were never serious about Matt Gaetz to begin with, which makes me wonder, okay, then what is the actual plan for the Trump administration? Because, Matt Gaetz on paper is just a horrible pick for Attorney General. It's, with the ethics report coming out, even before that report came out, we were kind of aware of the person that he is, and to have that be, the Attorney General of the United States is kind of a scary thought. But I do have to take a break here. Coming up in the next hour, we're going to have Brittany Ruland from Iowa. She's a Iowa Democratic strategist and community activist, and she's going to be talking to us about Iowa politics. This is Paul Chivari filling in for Patti Vasquez on Driving It Home.
And longtime CBS sportscaster Greg Gumbel has died from cancer. That word from his family. He was 78. This is AP News.
WCPT 820, Chicago's progressive talk, where facts matter.
Driving it home with Patti Vasquez, Patti Vasquez.
From global conflicts to greenhouse gases, the folks refusing to wear masks says, and politicians getting caught grabbing ass says, she's driving it home with Patti Vasquez.
Well, It's actually Paul Chivari filling in for Patti Vasquez today. Patti is taking a much-needed day off. Want to welcome in those of you in Minnesota listening on KTNF AM 950, the progressive voice of Minnesota, as well as those who have been listening on WCPT 820 on the Heartland signal. Brian from Joliet, I'm going to get to your call soon, but we have a guest on the line out of Iowa, a political consultant out of Des Moines, Iowa, Brittany Ruland. She most recently managed the top targeted Iowa House campaign and has been active within the Progressive Caucus and helping nominate new leadership in the DNC. And she's been a frequent contributor to Driving It Home with Patti Vasquez, and I get to talk to her today. Brittany, thank you so much for joining the show.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for chatting with me.
So I think this might be the first time we've had you on this show since the November election, so kind of a lot to talk about. And Iowa kind of played a significant role, or at least a role in this election with leading up to it, kind of hearing that the polling was favoring Kamala Harris. And then, then we see the results of the election, and now Donald Trump trying to sue Jay Ann Seltzer for, the polling. I'd imagine that that's probably one of the largest stories coming out of Iowa politics at the current moment.
Yeah, it definitely is. It was interesting because a couple of days before when that poll came out, with the numbers that they were, we were all going, wait, wouldn't that be crazy if Iowa actually did that, and it would be totally unprecedented. And so we were all kind of, at least on the staffing side of things, we're kind of holding our breath. We had polling that looked fairly good. I don't think that we were ever going to reach a threshold for Harris that was going to create a scenario where we showed that we were a blue state, but, it did look like it was going to be better than it was. And so it's been a very interesting situation post-election, trying to figure out where the data was maybe something that we should have seen differently and things like that. So those conversations, I think, will continue to happen. I think they're important for future elections as well. But yeah, it's definitely something. I know she has since retired, is what I had heard. And I am curious to kind of see how that goes with the lawsuit. I'm not sure exactly how far it'll go, but it's definitely something I'm keeping a close eye on.
Yeah, it just seems like that would be such a hard case for Trump to win because, it's an opinion poll. So, I mean, how can you prove that all of these people were, submitting, false opinions or, I think it's just such a Hail Mary attempt by Trump to just take down someone. And from what I understand, Seltzer's been fairly right in a lot of these polls that she's done over the years. So this one was just kind of an anomaly for her. And I guess I'd heard coincidentally she was going to retire after this election as well. So it's just kind of coincidental that it happens after this controversy. But I guess, is Iowa turning purple? I think that was the expectation that people got from those polls, whether it was going to be correct or not. But, I look at Iowa as a state that is fairly red. And then even looking at some of the election results since the recent census, no Democratic representatives at all at the federal level. It's exclusively on the right in the House, exclusively on the right with Ernst and Grassley. Is it turning purple despite some of these trends?
I think it's very unique in that there are pockets in the state. Des Moines is definitely one of them. That's a blue pocket. We do have some areas that we saw some state legislators who nobody necessarily thought that they had a chance to win, but they did. And so trying to figure out how we replicate that. But I think going back to, you had mentioned the legislature being exclusively right, we definitely, going back to the data again, we were not expecting it to turn out to the level that it did, because what people were telling us when we were out on the doors, voters were telling us what they were going to do and everything. It really felt like we had the means to turn it purple. And let's remember, Obama won Iowa. So this was somewhere that was purple not that long ago. We had held more than one congressional seat. And that was just, 4 or 6 years ago when we had that. So trying to figure out where that trend shifted, I think that there is a lot of folks here who just didn't turn out in the numbers that we needed them to. And that's something that I think across the board in the country, we did see that maybe there was a group of people that just decided to sit it out. And so that's another piece of it, because we have the ability to be purple. I just don't see that happening in the next 2 years. But when you're talking to voters, they do want change. I think that they're very unsure of what state versus federal. And I know I've talked to Patti about that before, too, is a lot of this is just educating voters, because not a lot of people realize when they're telling us that our number one issue is the economy or inflation, that's not really something that is a state policy issue. However, we saw a lot of people voting at the state level for state legislators thinking that that was their number one issue and that was going to change things, when in reality that's more of a federal level. And so trying to make sure we're differentiating that information for people, I think, is going to be key in the next 2-4 years, and just trying to hang on for the next 4 years and get through it. But I think we have a lot of close races that could switch back to Democrats. I mean, we had a senator here that lost by 41 votes, and that's just that's doable to fix and change. We just got to figure out what happened. So I think there's the potential there, and I'm gonna stick around and try to make sure I do everything I can to make that happen. But until we really start having some of those harder conversations, I'm not sure that we'll see that in the next cycle.
Did gerrymandering play into this, though? I mean, it's just kind of significant that, after the 2020 census, once you have the redistricting, how red it got. Is that something that's a concern there, that the districts were heavily gerrymandered, for the Republicans to get those victories?
So they weren't as bad as the original maps. And the way that it works here, it definitely could be worse, but it doesn't help. So the way they redrew the congressional maps especially, that definitely would have an influence on. They flipped a couple of counties that would have definitely created a scenario where it would have probably remained a blue seat. And so they definitely were heavily favoring conservatives and Republicans, but that's obviously because our legislature and then also the committees and everybody that's involved, you got a high number of those people who are in those influential positions. I don't think that it was as bad as some other states we've come out with, and that's because we did have some of those stopgap measures to make sure that we could push back and say, nope, this does not reflect population-wise correctly, but there is at least one that I am pretty confident if the maps didn't change to what they had, then we would have remained in that seat, because it was still a very close race, and it was just one county that predominantly would go left, and that one was cut out, so it was able to be absorbed with a more conservative one, and then it kind of, put the stop on the other one. So I think it did play a part. I don't think it was as significant as it could have been, but it definitely is something that we're going to have to keep an eye on. Also, we have, till 2030 to change it. So we've got a little bit of time to settle in and have to deal with it.
And I saw that, you recently managed a top targeted Iowa House campaign. Which campaign was that?
So I was running T.R. Mason's for Iowa House District 43's campaign. We, again, is very similar to the national race. We had, a lot of polling data that was saying that we were in good shape. We did outraise our opponent by about 11-1 by the end, and that was every quarter for filing. So we did all the right things. We were up on TV. We were doing social media. We were doing on the ground in person. We were doing all the things. It was a district that definitely was different because it changed boundaries. So that is one of the ones that this was in Johnston predominantly, but it had cut out a couple of other places that were, did a little bit better for us the last time. So that's a good example of a local one that did that. We've got a couple of races, the previous one that I'd ran, Senator Sarah Trungariot, she ended up winning by less than 30 votes. I believe towards the end they had to do a recount and they went through a whole thing. And we had won in the same district in 2022 in like that was about 820 votes that we had won, and the district hadn't changed. So to me and to everybody else that we're talking with is, okay, something shifted. What shifted to make it to where, that race was clearly won by 800 plus votes to somewhere where it's less than 30 votes that ultimately won? That's 2 years difference. So it's not a very long time. So we need to get to the bottom of that and figure that out.
Well, and just even looking at the first congressional district race, Marionette Miller Meeks beating Christina Ohanan by about 800 votes. That's such a narrow victory for her. Is that just kind of indicative of a lot of kind of the tighter races in Iowa where it's just like that slim of a margin between the two candidates?
Yeah, it absolutely was. It was, and Christina she had ran in 22 as well, and had lost by a much bigger margin. And to her credit and her team's credit, they did an incredible job, but they also started way before anybody else did. With my candidate, we did something similar. We started a year out. I believe that it's something that we're going to need to do in general with races is to make sure that we're not waiting to the last minute to get people in there, because it clearly takes time to build trust. But she did a fantastic job with her team of getting, some really big numbers of college age adults, and that's a demographic that we're not doing a good job of. And when we're seeing, even just not nationally, not just locally, but they got a much larger amount, and they also took the time to register thousands of new voters. And so that really makes an impact as well. And so knowing all of the work they put in, they were running for, I think, 18 months. For this race, so they kind of immediately got back up right after the loss in 22, figured out what they needed to do, and then did that. And it was hard, I know, for them to lose that one by such a slim margin, but you could absolutely tell that the work they were doing was imperative, or they wouldn't have even gotten that close. So it's doable. We just got to make sure we have the right resources, that everybody knows what the path is, and doing that together. And again, there's so many other races that were won or lost by those small margins this go around. We lost by, I believe it was like 600 votes. So it's uncomfortable to lose with that small of a margin, but it also should be noted for people who are looking for a little bit of hope that is doable to fix. We just got to figure out how we do that.
And I see that the election cycle isn't technically over for Iowa yet, as Governor Reynolds announced that there's going to be a special election on January 28th to fill the opening left by Chris Cornoyer, who, to my understanding, he's going to be the lieutenant governor. Is that correct?
Yes. Yep. So she had somebody who was just temporarily appointed for lieutenant governor while she was deciding who that was going to be. And so now that we know that, then we will have that special election. Obviously, it's a very short window of time. So that'll be interesting to see what happens with that. Again, going to keep close eyes on it. I've been talking with some different folks just today as well, some fellow consultants who have a few meetings coming up, just kind of talking through what they need. Obviously, it's in the holidays, so again, that gives you less time because people don't want to deal with politics as much right now. But it's going to be interesting to watch how that plays out. I don't believe we've had a special election that is statewide in a long time, but since that one is just, he was appointed by her, it's going to be interesting to see if she just essentially ordains somebody who is going to be the person to take that seat on the Republican side, or if we're going to have a decent race on our hands, even for a small little special election. So we will see. And
is there a Democratic candidate? I'm assuming that's just there's one from each party that's joining in the race, or is it kind of like a free-for-all where there's multiple candidates vying for the spot?
As far as I'm aware, there will be. I don't know who it's going to be yet, but usually the different parties will kind of pick the person they feel like is best to resonate with people in a very short period of time. So somebody that has good name ID, has good relationships with people in the district and things like that. So I'm kind of holding my breath with other people to see who that's going to be on our side of things. As far as it being kind of like a free-for-all, other people can, and we've had races, like even a city council race in the last year and a half or so in 2023, there was a special election because the city councilwoman had stepped down. And so everybody just kind of thought it was going to go to one person, and that was kind of just not going to be any big deal. And then there was like 5 people that jumped in, and it just became like quite an interesting situation. So people can definitely throw their hat in. It's whether or not they have the backing of the parties usually when they're going to be taken a little more seriously because, you know, the funding is there and things like that too. So it can be a combination of both. I would not be surprised if we have a few like libertarian candidates that jump in kind of just whenever they can, when they have an opportunity to. So we'll see how that goes with that extra party person in there. But I think we'll know fairly quickly who it's going to be on the Democratic side.
And I have a feeling, I don't know my Iowa geography that well, but is Clinton County, Jackson, and Scott counties are primarily just right-leaning, or are they kind of mixed up with left and right?
Yeah, Clinton County tends to go slightly more to the left. The other ones are more of right counties. That still goes into breaking down. We're still looking at a lot of information that came in from last election because we did see a lot of people vote top of the ticket Republican, but then they switched or they had a good combination of both, which goes back to the ability to be a purple state if we have the right conversations with people and get them out. So we had people that we thought we know voted right at the top of the ticket, but then were, you know, doing a combination of Democrat and Republican. So those counties specifically have been interesting, but I know Clinton County previously has been one that's been winnable for the Democratic side for a while. That is going to be remaining to be seen after what the election turnout was, is why I think it's going to be important and indicative of kind of the times we're going into, since that'll be right after the inauguration. And you know, we've already all kind of settled in with what has happened. So I think that's going to give us a good little, almost like a little internal poll of taking the temperature of where everybody's at. So
we're speaking with Brittany Ruland, who is a political consultant in Iowa. And before we let you go, Brittany, I know it's a little early to be thinking about it, but maybe not too early. In 2 years, you have 2 big federal elections, Joni Ernst and then the state, Kim Reynolds for governor, their terms ending. Who's going to step up to defeat them? Which Democrats are kind of the likely usual suspects that we should be looking into right now?
Yeah, so for Joni Ernst, I am still kind of listening to see if there's any information on who's going to be running there. I will say for against Kim Reynolds, I cannot firmly confirm this, like officially or anything like that, but I will say that there's been a pretty large rumor mill running that our state auditor, Rob Sand, is planning on taking that on, which I definitely consider Rob a friend, and I think he would do a fantastic job. I think we have a lot of awesome people that would be good candidates, but I know he's got some pretty great relationships. You know, we did have that big poll. I believe it was a national poll that showed that he's like top 5 of political people who people like. And, he's just well known. He's got good relationships with people. I think that he would do a fantastic job. So like I said, I can't officially say anything because I'm not like a part of the decision making, but I've been hearing the rumors swirling for a couple months now. And hopefully we'll get an answer on that officially in the next few months. But I think that would be a fantastic race to watch. And he definitely would bring a lot of people together. So.
And that was one of the names I had on my list of people to keep an eye on. I had Robert Sand, Jennifer Confirst, and Paul Dahl, who just seems like he's just a perennial candidate anyway. But was there anybody else though that we should be keeping an eye on out of the Iowa Democrats?
I think we do have quite a few people that, Nate Bolton is somebody that, even though he did just lose, he was actually my senator here in my Senate district. He lost by 41 votes, but he still polls really well. He is a great person. He's got an awesome family. He's definitely been involved for years. So I hope that he jumps back in. I don't know what position that would be, but, even if it's just running again in the same district that he just lost, since it's such a small margin, I think he's somebody to keep an eye on. I will always go back to my candidate, Sarah Trongaria. I think that she could take on any race that she wants, and she's such an amazing human being, and she's just really resonates with people. I don't know personally yet if there's anything bigger, but I think she's excited to settle in for a full term without having to run, because she's had to run every 2 years since she started. But I think keeping an eye on her in the next few cycles. And then, we've got a couple of people that I can't name drop yet, but I know people who are, trying to decide if they're going to go ahead and start getting involved. But I think those congressional seats are going to be something that's going to be up. People are having a lot of conversations about going into the next couple of cycles, and then the person against Joni Ernst is going to be interesting. So I will, hopefully I'll get to touch base with Patti again in the next couple of months, and I'll have some information to share, because we should be starting to hear names soon.
Well, we definitely look forward to that information when you get that to us, Brittany. And also, before you go, the Iowa caucuses, just some of the research that I've done on it. I know that there's like a firm track record of, usually picking who ends up becoming that party's nominee, but some weird pockets where it didn't happen, like 2020, for instance, where Pete Buttigieg got off to a great start in Iowa and I think kind of surprised everyone there. And then on the Republican side, years where you had like Ted Cruz or Rick Santorum or Mike Huckabee. I guess I don't quite know what my question is, but I guess it's like how much of a surprise do you tend to see in these caucuses? There's a lot of times where they end up picking the nominee, but when you have something like that where a Huckabee or a Buttigieg or someone like that tends to get the victory, like what do we learn from Iowans when they make a decision like that?
Yeah, I think that's a really great question. So, 2020 was interesting. I was a regional field director for Bernie Sanders, and so that was a really interesting night with how that played out. It basically became a tie, which, again, I don't think anybody was expecting, like you said. And so that was a really, really intriguing situation to kind of watch play out. But, Obama was basically figured out with, getting more national attention and everything here in Iowa, too. So I think the biggest thing that I have learned just working here and talking to folks is they take a lot of pride in the fact that there's not a trend necessarily that they will follow. So if they feel like, everything is saying it's going to go in one direction, Iowans tend to be like, I think it should actually go this direction. So they tend to really gravitate towards people who would maybe be classified like as an underdog or somebody who's just like really resonates with people. And the biggest piece of all of that is because the biggest thing I have learned, and I've been here for, 6 years now, is that people here require physical communication. Like they want to have somebody earn their vote. So I think any candidate that is actually getting out and doing the work, knocking on doors, talking to people at events, no matter how small and all that stuff, that goes so well for people in Iowa. And so I would say for the rest of the country, obviously we're not first in nation status anymore, but if you want to have somebody that has worked to earn the votes, if they come out of our caucus on top, that Iowans have said, all right, they have our stamp of approval, and we made them work for it, because we always do. So that would be my information on that. And it's just something that's really important. And we do, kitchen table politics is really important to families here. And so if you want somebody who's going to work really hard for you, definitely look for them to be the top of the ticket coming out of Iowa.
Well, Brittany Ruland, thank you so much for joining the show today and for kind of giving us an education in the heartland here about Iowa politics. We look forward to speaking with you in 2025 and hearing all that great information about what the state's going to be doing going forward.
Yeah, I really appreciate it. And I look forward to the conversation, and I will keep sharing as I have more information, and I look forward to staying in touch.
All right. That's Brittany Ruland, a political consultant out of Des Moines, Iowa, joining Driving It Home with Patti Vasquez. Paul Chivari filling in for Patti, who's going to be back on Monday. We're going to be back with more of the show in just a moment.
This is WCPT 820, where facts matter.
You're listening to Driving It Home with Patti Vasquez on WCPT 820.
It's Paul Chivari filling in for Patti Vasquez on Driving It Home. That was a great segment with Brittany Ruland. Learned a lot myself about some of the stuff in Iowa politics. It's a state that I really don't tend to research or look into a lot, but when I heard that she was going to be on the guest list for today, I was having a fun time kind of learning about the state and being able to talk to her about that and learn some things. That was wonderful. But waiting patiently on the line, I wanted to make sure to give him enough time to talk about what he wanted to talk about. Brian from Joliet wanted to talk about President Biden. Brian, thanks for calling in today.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you for taking my call.
Always.
Thank you. The reason I'm calling today is because I applaud President Biden's commutations of these the death penalty. I'm opposed to the death penalty, and for one reason is that what if a mistake is made, you get the wrong person, and how do you ever make that up? I think it's barbaric anyway.
And it happens more frequently than I think we'd like to admit. I think I was just reading this week about a guy that got out of prison after so many years that was falsely accused of a murder. So I think that's a great point. It's such an inhumane, barbaric form of punishment, and we don't have the most perfect legal system. So that's an excellent point, Brian.
Well, thank you very much, and that's the point I wanted to make, and you have Happy New Year.
You too, Brian. Thank you so much. I expected Brian to add a little bit more to that. That's he usually spends some time with us here, but I'm thankful that he called in, and I think, in the coming weeks, I think we're going to be talking a lot about the Biden administration and what we enjoyed out of these last 4 years from him, and maybe what things that he could have done better. The hindsight, kicking ourselves, wondering how it could have worked out better for him. But for me, I think he was a surprise in a good way how his administration turned out. I wasn't quite sure that a lifetime senator who was kind of center right sometimes on some of his decisions in the Senate actually ended up being a very left-leaning. I think, with Bernie Sanders staying in the 2020 Democratic primary, sticking it out all the way to the end, just to try and influence the party platform, I think it had a significant effect on it, because I think you saw with President Biden that he was a little bit more left-leaning than people made him out to be going into 2020. So I applaud him for that, and I think, down the stretch here with the commutation of those 30-something, I think it was like 37 death penalty sentences being changed into life without parole sentences. That's significant. That's, I think that was something that I think a lot of people didn't expect out of him. And, I think we're going to be talking about some of those other things, including the infrastructure bill that he was able to pass. I think, we're going to be talking about that in the next few weeks, what we enjoyed out of these last 4 years out of him. But yeah, I think, it's so crazy to think that, we're talking about a one-term Joe Biden presidency. It's wrapping up, in about a week here, we're going to have a brand new Congress. And I kind of wanted to get to that 119th Congress when it takes shape. I was trying to think back to the 116th Congress started in the midst of a government shutdown, and this Congress won't be dealing with that, but they came awfully close to having that be kind of weighing on the first order of business for them. But with the previous Congress in the 118th, if we remember, they struggled to select a Speaker of the House. Despite the Republicans having a firm majority in the party, they couldn't agree on anybody, and it took multiple rounds of voting to eventually land on who everybody assumed was going to get it anyway, in Kevin McCarthy, and then creating the stipulation that if one House member calls for a vote to oust the Speaker, that they can do that, and we eventually landed on Mike Johnson. And, of course, the Democrats played ball with the Republicans to kind of help them settle that. So once again, the Democrats come in and clean up a messy Republican situation. And I think that's something that we need to keep an eye on next Friday. Will they unilaterally get Mike Johnson back into the speaker's chair? Because we've seen that he has a lot of critics on his own side, and a lot of people did not like that he was able to pass that resolution right before they went on their winter break. So will the MAGA Republicans keep Mike Johnson from retaining the speakership? And of course, I expect the Democrats in the first few rounds of voting to pick, unanimously pick Hakeem Jeffries, even though they won't have enough votes to get him over the hump unless a few Republicans are feeling cheeky. But that, of course, would be political suicide, I think, on the right if, having the majority and picking a left-leaning speaker. So it'll be interesting to see if they go with Mike Johnson or if they go with someone else and how many votes it'll take them to get there. And I think that might be, in my opinion, an indicator as to, is this party in lockstep? Is this GOP, as we see it now in Trump's second term, are they going to be a little bit more, hard right, following what he says and just kind of in lockstep with each other where, it's going to be the MAGA brand of Republican dominating that side of the GOP. So we'll keep an eye on that for you next week. I'm going to take a quick break here, and when I come back, I'm going to take more of your phone calls. This is Paul Chivari filling in for Patti Vasquez on Driving It Home.
This is WCPT 820, where facts matter.
Patti Vasquez is taking your calls now at 773-763-9278. Driving It Home with Patti Vasquez now on WCPT 820.
Well, it's Paul Chivari filling in for Patti Vasquez on Driving It Home with Patti Vasquez, and I am taking your calls at 773-763-9278. That's 773-763-WCPT. I want to thank everybody listening on KTNF AM 950 in Minnesota, as well as right here, WCPT 820 in Chicago on the Heartland Signal. Going to the phones, we have Debbie from Old Town on the line. Debbie, you wanted to talk about Democrats not arguing makes us look weak. Kind of want to have you expand on that point.
Well, I just think, when they say something or do something, we don't address it. I am so sick of the media, not addressing the reality of what's really going on. I've been listening to local news to hear what's going on. But as far as politics goes, I'm so burnt out with it because I'm so sick of listening to mealy-mouthed Democrats, just let them walk all over us, lie all over us, and not, counter back on a regular basis. And about that sign thing on the highway, I think that's a brilliant idea. We were going to Kenosha to canvass every weekend for Kamala, and everywhere were large billboards. I mean, there were billboards. There was a billboard that said Democrats for Trump. And you know what? It was from one lady. It was from one wealthy lady who had the money to put up that sign. She was from Florida, and it was very impactful. It was, when we got off the highway and saw that, every time we thought to ourselves, gee, I wonder if that's really happening here.
Yeah, I think we can count on one hand how many Democrats voted for Trump, whereas I think you get a lot of Republicans that are anti-Trump, more so in that regard. But, and the billboard idea I think is good because it hits people where you can expect to find them. People are driving on the highway regardless of their political thoughts. So being able to see that is something where you can reach them. Whereas, like you're saying, you watch the news, you go to your sources to get informed, and not a lot of people are seeking out some of those sources to be informed. It was amazing to me how low informed voters were in this 2024 cycle. So yeah, I think that's a great point, Debbie.
And when I had a bullet point, a sheet with a bullet point of all his Project 2025. People didn't have a clue that any of that stuff even existed. They didn't read Time Magazine's article and go through, it's on the internet, you can look. They're not doing that. They want it in their face. They're lazy. They want it easy, and they want it in their face. I mean, I can't tell you how many people I said, my God, I'm really scared about Social Security and Medicare. I am a person of a certain age. And they said to me, oh, he wouldn't do that. He couldn't do that. Well, that's one of the first things they're talking about.
Yep.
And I think one of the things we really need to do a deep dive in, I suggested to Joan at one point to do a deep dive into how much help immigrants bring to America, how worthy we are to even have them. You know, they earn their keep. And the other point I would like to make is to do a deep dive into the difference between entitlements and annuities, because nobody understands what that is. And they think, oh, Social Security, you know, that's just something they give to you. Medicare, no.
That's our money.
We pay into them, and they can't. It's not like a tax. We pay into them for that purpose, and I really wish somebody would do a deep dive, because it's such a confusing topic, just to disseminate clearly what's an annuity and what's an entitlement. You know, I'm not talking about welfare. I'm talking about an annuity, something we pay into. And we have to know the details of these things. We have to be able to talk about them, you know, like intelligently.
Yeah, and you know, with you trying to inform people about Project 2025, regardless of what the Republican Party and their attachment to that, you know, they're denying, you know, Trump denying it before the election. If anyone's been paying attention to politics over the last 20 years, regardless of Project 2025 or not, that was the playbook anyway. They've always been talking about some of the things that they found in it. They just happened now to make a playbook that had firm examples of what exactly they intend on doing. We were aware of some of this stuff. And yeah, Social Security was one of the big ones that they've been. How long have the Republicans been threatening Social Security? I mean, I've been voting for at least 20 years now, and I remember every election cycle hearing that the Republicans wanted to slash Social Security. So just from, you know, that one example from Project 2025, you know, no matter what name they want to put on it, it is the Republican agenda. So it's crazy to me that people would be so blind to that and how dismissive the Republicans were ahead of it when, you know, they weren't fooling anybody. Those of us in the know are very aware that that's their intention.
Well, I really think that Democrats are more intellectual. I think Republicans are more, I'm not saying they're less intelligent, but there's a huge mix there. You know, I mean, there's like,
data to support that. I mean, it's like most college educated people tend to vote Democratic.
Exactly, and I really feel that we hit all the intellectual tones in our talking points. We need to hit some basic, bare bones points that just get it to the heart. You know, boom, gut punch, boom, hit it to your heart. You know, hit people where they feel it and where they understand it, not where they have to use a dictionary to figure out what somebody's talking about, or go on the internet and Google, you know, what does that mean? You know, no, we need to, I know that all goes back to messaging. You know, definitely goes back to messaging. But, you know, the fact that our messaging sucks is kind of like a state of being. So we kind of have to figure out how to be more simplistic about what we say and what we mean, and just get it out and get it clear so that people aren't going, oh, well, that's an intelligent thought. You know, no, screw the intelligent thoughts. Let's just hit them. Let's just, you know, not sound weak and mealy-mouthed. You know, let's be strong, and let's really go at it. Because, you know, this is going to be a very difficult 2 years. And I think in 2 years he's going to do a tremendous amount of harm. But I don't think we're going to go past the 2-year point with this. So what we have to do for the next 2 years is really, really, you know, buckle down, strategize, and figure out how to get our messaging and how to get our points across clearly and succinctly, and not worry about, oh, we have to make it an intelligent statement. No, screw that.
Well, you're not the first person to suggest that today on the show. I think that's how we're all feeling as Democrats. Debbie, thank you so much for your call. That's it's great insight.
Thank you.
I think to kind of her point, this election kind of felt like like your high school student council votes where like the jocks beat the nerds on this one, and the jocks are the populist candidate in this regard. So I think it's like sounding smart maybe hurt the Democrats this time around, where maybe we came across as elitists or just thumbing our nose at society from our lofty tower. But the truth of the matter is we're a big tent party. We represent a lot of different people, and not to get into generalities, but it seems that the right leaning voter is the low income voter, the low informed voter, and I think I'm paraphrasing it, but when Trump was saying that he likes the Republicans because they kind of tend to be kind of the dumber sort of voter, and I think he played into that. I think a sucker's born every minute, and he found about 74 million of them every 4 years. So it's going to be interesting to see how the messaging changes over these next 2 years. And if I recall correctly, in 2018, in the first midterm elections in the first Trump administration, it overwhelmingly went blue, and I think that was because people kind of finally got a taste of what he was like as a leader, and I'm wondering if we're going to see that same thing happen again. And I hope we don't fall victim to 2 years from now, when he hasn't fixed anything, that they're still blaming Biden, who's been out of the office for a while. And it's crazy to me how if it's a victory, a stock market victory, Trump did that, it's because he's going to be president. And then when the stock market has huge losses, it's that's that Biden economy again. And it's and it's far from the truth, but I'm wondering though how much we're going to hear about Biden being the problem for Trump, and how long is it going to go? When is it too late? Because I know that there's always residual from one administration to the next, but that runs out sooner or later, and at the same time, certain things do have that hard deadline of January 20th. So it's not always. Not always that residual effect. Sometimes it can be the immediate effect. And of course, this guy's talking about being a dictator on the first day. Going back to the, he says he can change or solve or resolve the Ukraine-Russia conflict in 24 hours. Well, when does that 24 hours start? Is it 12 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, January 20th to 12 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, January 21st? Or are we going to give him a day to celebrate and party and feel good about himself, and then he gets to work on January 21st? I mean, we know, as every president does, immediately after the ceremony, they go into the Oval Office and start, signing all the different executive orders. What executive orders are we expecting Trump to sign on that first day? But the point, though, about the Ukraine-Russia conflict, if he can end it so soon, why did he need to be president in order to do it? You can be a diplomat without having to be a president, and especially with the influence that Donald Trump has and his claimed connections to Vladimir Putin, he could have been talking to him this entire time. So I just feel like he's just pushing off the inevitable, and we're going to find out that the only way he can resolve it is a compromise, which would favor Russia getting something when they don't deserve a darn thing. So that's just kind of my take, at least on one aspect of Donald Trump, where he's saying he can change a lot of things. But I want to go back to the phones. We got someone on the line, one of my favorite people, someone that I've been on the air with here, Dan Schaefer, who's also been a guest host on this show, joining us right now. Dan, thanks for calling in, buddy.
Hello, my friend. How are you? Did you have a good Christmas?
I did. What about you?
Good. I did. Yeah, quiet, which is perfect.
I should know you'd get a kick out of this. I have stepchildren that are of drinking age, and they're not drinkers themselves, but I was given a bottle of Woodford Reserve by one of my kids this year.
Oh, perfect.
Yeah.
What a great Christmas gift.
Yeah, so
That's amazing.
Me, I'm happy with that.
Yeah. No, I just wanted to chime in. I wanted to say Donald Trump said that he loves the poorly educated. Those are the Republican voters that he was referring to. Also, Elon Musk made a comment about how he wants to rid the Republican Party of the MAGA people. That was Axios posted that today. And I think that the Republican Party is, I think that they are in full-fledged civil war. I think they're on the verge of that, honestly, because I think that there's going to be a lot of infighting, and they only have themselves to blame at this point.
I agree with you on the aspect that there's infighting. What I'm wondering is who's actually going to stand up, because we saw how Adam Kinzinger and Liz Cheney got ousted from the party, and that,
and they got thrown to the curb. Yeah.
Yeah. And, and even like Mitt Romney was trying his best to, kind of be the canary in the coal mine. I'm wondering, though, if
I never thought that I would.
Oh, yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
Romney or Cheney or, but here we are. And, yeah.
And it's
but I do think that, but also I would like to point out that you were talking about the Biden economy. Mm-hmm. Every Republican president in my history has left the economy in worse sorts than they found it, and it takes the Democrats to fix it. But then the Democrats get blamed for it because you have to spend money to fix the economy. And then you go after quote-unquote entitlement programs. But it's the Republicans who literally run up the deficit, run up the debt, and then they just kick it off. And then they play the blame game the best. And we just fall for it every time. We need to stop doing that.
And you're absolutely right. I think we're about the same age, and I recall both Bushes leaving the economy in a bad spot. Reagan, but Reagan transitioning to Bush, and leaving that for Clinton to clean up, leaving W left it for Obama to clean up, and then Trump, of course, how he left things during the COVID pandemic, and Biden had to clean that up. And I thought it was great. How the
next 4 years go.
Right, yeah, and I thought it was great in the DNC when Bill Clinton brought up that how lopsided the jobs creation numbers are under Democratic presidents versus Republican presidents going back the last 40-some years. It was like 55 million to 1 million jobs created in that time frame, in the plus minus. And that's something that I wish the Democrats would have played up a little bit more leading up to this election. But Dan, I got to let you go. I got to do some housekeeping here.
All right, have a good night.
You too. Call in earlier next time, okay?
I will, definitely, yeah. All right, take care.
That's Dan Schaefer. You can hear him on these airwaves every now and then filling in on this show. Want to talk about some of the stuff going on here on WCPT that we got coming up here Sunday on Out Chicago. Scott Duff and Ellen Miller have selected a few of their favorite interviews from the past year for part 2 of a 2-part year-end special. Tune in to hear interviews with Death Becomes Her star Michelle Williams, singer and satirist Randy Rainbow, Michael Johnson of Equality Illinois, Jen Grosshandler, and Gara Goldstein of the Gender Cool Project. It's Chicago's only live broadcast for the LGBTQ community, and that's this Sunday, 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. on WCPT. Choose Views. Richard is going to have Monday taking your calls and talking about the weekend in politics, and then John St. Augustine will be filling in for Joan at 2 o'clock. His guests include AI and cybersecurity expert Dawn Christie, Julie Murphy, author of The Emotion Behind Money, Building Wealth from the Inside Out, and Chicago radio and TV personality Jennifer Weigel, and that's live, local, and progressive weekdays 2 to 5 p.m. Central here on WCPT. And, of course, the Sports Cubicle, normally on Sundays at 9 p.m. While I'm not sure if we're going to have a replay or a broadcast this week at 9, we are definitely going to be live in studio 4 p.m. to 6 p.m. for the next 4 Sundays. Please call in as we will be taking your calls live. This Sunday especially, we're going to be looking back at the year in sports 2024. Didn't get a lot of time to talk about the year 2024 around the world. The bridge collapsing in Baltimore, the hurricane that affected the southeastern United States, all of the various elections around the world, including right here in the United States, the eclipse, all that stuff. So 2024 was a crazy year. How can I forget the Paris Olympics and how eventful those were? We were introduced to Ray Gunn, the Australian breakdancer, and some of the ridiculous moves that she had that basically garnered almost no points in her whole thing. But I got to wrap it up. That's going to do it for Driving It Home with Patti Vasquez. I'm Paul Chivari. Thanks for listening today. Randy Rhodes is up next if you're listening to WCPT, and if you're listening to the Progressive Voice of Minnesota, KTNF AM 950, you'll hear Ghost Box Radio. So long, everybody. We'll see you after the weekend.